Hi again. I'm back with another Q video. Last time we discussed the phrase Jesus saves and how that might mean more than we are sometimes led to believe. Today we're still using our family ministry matrix as a guide. I want to discuss some more of the questions to ask that we find at the bottom. If you look at the bottom of column 2, you will see, who is Jesus? Can I trust him? And who is my neighbor? First, if you want to go back to the questions in the first column, check out video QT4, tour number 4, and I discussed where is God and who does God love. So first for today though, who is Jesus? Obviously, that's a pretty big question. There's been a few books written about that already, so I'll try to just be concise. Jesus is God made flesh. Colossians 1 gets to the point pretty well, starting in verse 15. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. So we can see Paul's a lot more poetic than I am, but basically Jesus is God's son, God with skin on. Also, an important aspect that's pointed out, though, in these verses is Jesus' supremacy. He is king. He's our king. So which leads pretty good to our second question, actually. Can I trust him? We hear a lot of talk about having faith in Jesus or trusting in Jesus, but I'm not always sure we know exactly what that means. We often put so much emphasis on the belief in Jesus and forget that trusting in Jesus also involves following his teachings and giving him our allegiance. It's quite possible to say that you believe Jesus did this or that thing without giving him your trust or your loyalty or living out the things that he taught. Okay, that's another big topic, and we can't get through it all today, so we're going to move on to the last question. Who is my neighbor? You might think this is one does not really fit in with the first two, but I think I can explain how it does. If we're going to trust Jesus as our king, then we are going to want to live out his teachings. And when we really get to the bare bones of what Jesus taught, it is love God and love your neighbor. And I would say that one of the best ways to actively love God is by loving your neighbor. So that leads us to the third question. Who is my neighbor? Everyone. Everyone is your neighbor. Jesus was asked this question, and it's how we got to the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus wanted to emphasize how far loving your neighbor reached. And so in his story, he had the demonstration of love happen between two people from communities that hated one another. I think the Good Samaritan story also demonstrates that our neighbor is the one we see who is in need. Now, this takes practice, though. As you can see in the box just above the questions, it's at-home practices on the matrix. And it says in there that we need to practice compassion and empathy. Children and adults need to intentionally practice having compassion and empathy for others in order to see who is in need. If 2020 is doing anything for us, it is giving us the opportunity to practice seeing. Do we see those that are hurting and are more at risk due to COVID-19? Do we see our neighbors of other races who have had different experiences growing up in America than we have? How do we show them love? What is our King calling us to?